It gives me great pleasure now to bring on board Mr. RC Bhargava of Maruti. Mr. Bhargava, good afternoon to you once again. Thank you for joining us.
Good
First,
afternoon.
let me get a reaction going from you, Mr. Bhargava, on partial lockdown. What is your understanding now that some guidelines have been released? Are you in a position to start some of your plants based on the lockdown guidelines?
You know, we are still studying these guidelines. The main issue is that starting our own undertaking, our own factories is not good enough. We need to make sure that all parts and components which are required for a car are available, which means all our vendors must be functioning anywhere in the country. Now, to the best of our information and knowledge, that is not likely to happen because several of the vendors may be in the containment zones once they are announced. So that will be one issue. We have also to see exactly how this will work on the retailing of the cars, and that also is not very clear. We need to study that a little bit more. But if we can get all the components that we need by finding alternative sources, and if we can get the retail going, then I think we have all our systems in place for starting production.
Okay. If one works with the assumption that the lockdown will be lifted in the month of May, can I assume that in the month of May it will take at least 2 to 3 weeks for Maruti to resume normal production because of the factors you mentioned in terms of component availability and supplier and raw material availability?
You know, even when the lockdown is lifted on the 3rd of May, we still don't know what would be the position in the red zones and whether production can start without restrictions in a red zone seems to me very unlikely, besides the fact of being very risky. So we'll have to see as we go along how the situation develops.
Okay. How should Maruti shareholders look at this lockdown? How will this impact the company? How will this impact the financials? How will this impact your margins and ratios?
You know, I'm not in a position to give any guidance there, but I think it's obvious that depending on what kind of production levels take place and depending on what kind of demand develops in the market, the results will depend on that. Yeah, there are far too many variables at this time to give any kind of forecast or guidance on what is going to happen.
How do you see the consumer behavior for a car buyer will change because of this crisis?
You know, there's one school of thought which says that there is a likelihood of consumers holding back because of the uncertainty and what's happening and not making big ticket purchases. There's another school of thought which points out what happened in China, where after the lockdown was lifted, consumers made a beeline to buy more and more personal transport because they were hesitant or reluctant to use public transport. Now, what the situation in India will be could be either of these two or something in between.
Okay. Our understanding, Mr. Bhargava, is that a lot of companies, not just auto companies, all companies today will be looking at things like cost rationalization, automation, and bringing their variable cost down. Do you think the new normal for India is going to be cost cutting and automation, not just for car companies, but everybody?
You know, cost cutting and becoming more competitive was even earlier a very important thing for India because manufacturing in India needed to become much more competitive than what it is. If foreign investment was coming in a small trickle towards the manufacturing activity, it was because competitive manufacturing in India was not of the same order as in various other countries. So I think this whole area of becoming more competitive, which has a major element of cost cutting, both by industry and by other factors which add to cost, is something which has become even much more important now than it ever was. And I hope that this will become one of the areas where both industry as well as the various governments, state and central, will pay attention, because competitiveness is going to be the key going forward. And that will involve all kinds of activities, including cutting down on top management salaries, cutting down on travel, cutting down on entertainment, cutting down on overheads, reducing capital expenditure, improving productivity, improving quality so that rework and rejections come down. All kinds of things will have to be done.
Okay. Mr. Bhargav, while Maruti is a cash-rich company, no debt, just to establish that for the benefit of our viewers. But that's not the story for every other corporate in India. That's not the story for auto components. That's not the story for auto dealers who essentially have showrooms and agencies. Because of what is happening in the auto sector, how do you think the balance sheets and the businesses and the pure existence of some of the other aspects of auto industry would move?
Well, it's going to be a challenge for a lot of them. And what I was saying earlier about cutting down costs and building internal reserves so that you can grow is something which a lot of companies have neglected, including vendors, including dealers. They'll have to pay attention to that. I think which involves the managements, the promoters leading much more frugal lives so that more money can remain within the company. But at the same time, I think some of these companies, to remain afloat, will probably need some kind of financial support from the government, from the banks, and they may ask the OEMs for support. So I'm not sure what the OEM policy would be. We have not taken any policy decision on this matter.
Okay. For auto companies, Mr. Bhargav, retail experience is a unique experience. You know, a car buyer wants to see the car, drive the car,
Sure.
touch the car, feel the car. But given that social distancing would be a challenge, do you think there is going to be change in the way how auto or car sales would be sold? I mean, online experience and digital experiences, do you think they can take over?
I think there will be some changes happening. It's already happening. We have experienced in the last month a very sharp uptick in the number of digital inquiries we are getting. And I think more and more customers, because of all this fear of contracting COVID and this social distancing and not touching things and all that, will try and see how they can make maximum use of technology to buy cars. I think they'll still come to the showroom, but within the showrooms, Maruti will ensure that every possible safeguard is taken to ensure that the customers who come into the showroom remain entirely safe.
Mr. Bhargav, what to your mind is the definition of a reasonable fiscal package from the government? Because every sector wants the government help and government intervention. Not all sectors will get it. It needs to be prioritized. But your definition of a good package, let's hear it out.
Well, if I was in the government, I would particularly want to support, of course, the essential industries. But then I would look at industries which have the maximum impact on generating employment across different sectors of the economy. And I would particularly want those activities to start and revive quickly, which have the maximum impact on employment generation. But at the same time, I think government cannot let other industries languish or die. And therefore, the whole picture will have to be seen as to how it can be done. But given the limited resources and the alternative calls on those resources of the government, I think the government will have to do a certain amount of prioritization as to what areas should receive how much support.
Okay. Mr. Bhargav, for those who are saying, I mean, IMF today has said that, look, the crisis is going to be as bad as what we've seen in 1929. Consumer demand will come down, capex demand will come down, both on the demand side and the supply side, there is a destruction which will happen. Do you think the situation is not as dire as a lot of global economists are calling it, or we've not seen the worst?
I don't think that the situation can be compared to 1929 or that kind of a depression. It's not like that. And in India especially, I think we will bounce back much faster because the demand situation in India and with the kind of population we have, and if the measures taken by the government and by industry do result in making our manufacturing more competitive, I firmly believe that industry and the economy will bounce back faster than India than in almost any other place in the world.
Once the lockdown is over, do you think it would be easy to ramp up capacity, easy to ramp up supply? And once supply starts coming back in the system, 6, 8, 12 months, you may actually see a very strong recovery?
See, our ability to produce will depend on the ability to contain the virus. That's why the government policies, which some people criticize, but I think they do not understand that you cannot, industry cannot proceed to produce at full capacity if there's a large incidence of disease happening in the employees, amongst the suppliers and others. And therefore, containment of the disease becomes an absolutely imperative in order to enable industry to go ahead. And that is why this red zone areas and containing the red zones to remain without spreading is an absolutely crucial aspect of what happens to the economy going forward. The idea that once this lockdown is lifted, everything will get back to normal is also not correct, because the virus and the danger of the virus remains very much alive, lockdown or no lockdown. And for many months in the future, I think everybody, including industry, will have to continue to take all possible measures to ensure that the infection and the disease does not recur, does not come back, because it can come back very quickly. And that is why the need for a great deal of vigilance has to be exercised by everybody. And with that, how quickly industry can get back to its normal, I think needs to be evaluated as we go along, because it will depend on the containment of the disease. And once there is a vaccine which will control this disease occurrence, when there is some kind of a better cure for the disease, I think that is the time when I think we can look to get back to the kind of way of working we had beforehand.
Now, because of the slowdown, do you think all car companies, including Maruti, they will go slow on capex and new brand and new product launches? Do you think that could happen?
The capex part of it, of course, depends on how much capacity requirement will come up in the economy. And I think all car companies will have to make an assessment of what they think is going to be the demand next year, year after next, because the gestation time for increasing capacity is about 1.5 years to 2 years. And so you have to make some kind of a forecast, some kind of an estimate of what is going to happen in the future. So that is going to be on the capex side. As far as new models are concerned, people are developing new models anyway. They're in different stages of development. And I don't see any particular reason for postponing the introduction of a new model. Of course, it requires a certain amount of capex to be incurred, but a certain amount of capex in most cases will already have been incurred, and postponing it may not be really a positive step in terms of creating better customer demand and increasing sales for the future.
Okay, just two more follow-up questions, Mr. Bhargav. When things will normalize, do you think which end of the car market will take the hit the most? Will it be luxury or high-end or SUV market, or it could be base entry-level cars, because that's where the maximum crunch in the economy has happened?
Personally, I think that the lower end of the market will revive faster. And that is because, again, going by the Chinese experience of people wanting to get personal transport for traveling, the restrictions on the number of people who can sit in a car, the shared platform cars like Uber and Ola not being able to carry 4 people, but we're able to carry only 2 people, all of that will require more vehicles. Even for production areas, for Maruti, for example, we will have to hire twice as many buses as we had earlier, because the capacity in each bus can only be 30 or 40% of its capacity.
How are you dealing with, or how are you personally dealing with this slowdown? Has this slowdown made you more tech savvy? Have you started using more digital tools? How does your day start? How does your day end?
No, I have been working from home for a long time. I only went to the Maruti offices when there was a meeting. Otherwise, I did all my work from home. So to some extent, I was using digital tools anyway, including for banking and payments and such things. What has changed is that meetings today now are also being done using technology, whether one uses Zoom or one uses WebEx. Those things are new, which have come up, which I wasn't doing earlier. But otherwise, there's not much difference in the way I was working and living earlier than what it is today.
All of us are, coming with new thoughts, new mantras, new ways. How can we really manage and become stronger in this crisis? So what would be your mantra, your message to your shareholders, employees, and to our viewers, people who look up onto you, people who know that you're an experienced man, you have a deep understanding of businesses and the car auto industry?
I think everybody in different parts of the economy has a different role to play. But one thing which is common for all is that we have to be very disciplined. We have to follow the government instructions very meticulously, because doing that is even more in our interest than anything else. Because if we don't follow instructions, and production and the economy and all of that suffer, production has to close down, I think all of us will suffer. So that's one thing which is important. We as a country are not very good at following discipline, following rules, following regulations. I think I would appeal to everybody to look at that, and irrespective of whether you are a big man or a rich man or a powerful man or an ordinary citizen, please follow government regulations meticulously. The second thing which I think comes out of this is the fact that the people are ultimately all much more equal than what we thought we were. This whole system of hierarchies and castes and classification of people on the basis of income and wealth and such things, has no meaning, because we've seen how a small little virus can get to a prime minister, can get to a royalty, as well as can get to an ordinary man. And a different form of livelihood is required in the future. I think we have to become much more aware of our responsibilities for the poor, of helping to create a more equitable society. I think that is something which we need. And if we do that, if we look at people as partners and as equals to us in terms of human beings, not necessarily in terms of our responsibilities, then I think a lot of things will change in India, and it will help in growing the economy much faster.
Okay, you know, I've got a follow-up question immediately on my Twitter account for those who saw the show live, and they're saying, please ask Mr. Bhargava what will happen to auto jobs. Not about Maruti in particular, but about auto jobs in general.
Well, at the moment, I think the situation doesn't look particularly bright. I'm talking about the very short term. But if we look a year or 2 years in the future, and if this experience of dealing with the COVID creates a new kind of way of working in India, which I hope it will, like what we've been discussing, I think the growth of the economy can really increase exponentially. And while 2021 may not be a very exciting year in that respect, I think beyond that, we should look for a lot of opportunities. The auto industry is an industry where there's a huge scope for growth. In fact, India now has the best scope for growth in the auto sector compared to any other country in the world. We're the 4th largest country for car production. We will become 3rd very soon, and we will go up rapidly, depending, of course, on our competitiveness and the cooperation which there exists between industry and government on making this happen.
Okay, so you're not answering my question directly, sir. Do you expect a big job losses in the auto sector? Because I'm not talking about auto companies, let's say auto dealers, auto OEMs, auto sector, auto ancillaries.
I think during this year, as I said, it's not going to be a good year. And there could be job losses. I hope as many dealers, as many vendors as possible will find a way of keeping people even with part wages if they don't need them fully. I hope they will not get rid of these people, because it's not easy to get back people with skills. And if you have developed skills in employees over a period of time, there is a great deal of value in making sure that those people remain with you, remain loyal, and available when the market starts going up.
All right, Mr. Bhargav, really appreciate your time. Thank you for outlining your thoughts, and thank you for this chat. Stay safe, and thank you for your valid inputs.